Welcome to the podcast today. My name is Douglas Gabriel, and today I'm going to be talking about something that I'm very excited about because Tyla and her team, her production team, and all of her IT people, all these people got together and we decided that the ebook called The Human Heart, a Supersensible Organ of Perception, should really be, that was put out as a serialized ebook, is now going to be put all in one place. So it's going to be in a form that is like all of our other books, not all of our other books, but a bunch of them, which are in PDF form that you can get for free. So I'm terribly excited about this. Now, why am I excited about this book more so than anything else, any other book? Well, that's because it was the greatest honor that I have ever had to write about this book. Well, certainly one of the greatest. That's because I went into it very naively and came out so dumbfounded by what I found in my research that eventually I said to Tyler, we have to put this into a book because it's just so amazing. And as I was going through this and relating it to her each day, uh, you know, hearing it out loud and having her response and her helping me formulate the whole thing, we realized that it is just so profound we couldn't hold it back. So we didn't put it into a book form like many of our others that you can find on Amazon. We simply put it out serialized through Neo-Anthroposophy, Our Spirit, Aim for Truth, and other places, and also on our site that said the gifts of the Gabriels to you. And on that site, I believe there's 6 or 7, 8 books, and this was one, but it was serialized. So you'd have to read one section, and then down at the bottom, hit a URL link and go to the second. Now it's all going to be in one book. So I'm terribly excited. And today I'm going to present how that came about, which is a strange, crazy story. A long, long time ago, when I was a Waldorf teacher, I was terribly concerned about the growth of Waldorf education. And I took quite seriously everything Rudolf Steiner said. And he said that when there are more than 200 Waldorf schools in the world that had developed islands of culture. Now, this concept, islands of culture, Tyla, Betsy wants me to talk about, and I'll be talking about that pretty soon in one of our Akasha series. But the point is that these islands of cultures all cluster around Waldorf schools and Waldorf initiatives, whether they be Christian communities, Waldorf hospitals, clinics, biodynamic farms, so on and so forth. And so I said, wanting to see the spread of Waldorf education in North America, I was the unofficial business manager of the Association of Waldorf Schools of North America, and I was trying to promote Waldorf in a big way. And so I was reading this, and Rudolf Steiner said the hindrance would be that as long as human beings, through scientists, of course, believe that the heart is a pump, it will hinder Waldorf education from going forward. As a matter of fact, he said that when we prove that the heart is not a pump, then the hindrances to Waldorf education will be removed and it will be able to advance. So I worked with a friend, one of my favorite people. He was like a dad to me, Ralph Marinelli, an Italian guy. He'd been in the Army. He ran the Army lab to do experiments. And so he eventually became a Waldorf teacher for a moment to take 7th and 8th grade through. I was his mentor at that time. And I worked with him very closely, but he was so dear to me. I cannot express how dear Ralph was to me. And he's a genius. And he laughed more than anybody I know. And he told jokes all day long. So I said to Ralph when he graduated his 8th grade class, like I used to with my brothers, you see this X I'm going to put on your arm? See that X? I'm going to hit it every time I see you because I'm going to ask you a question. Have you proven that the heart is not a pump yet? And if you haven't proven it, I'm going to put an X on your arm and I'm going to hit you. And so I did. And the first time he goes, hey, whoa, hey, that's a serious punch. What are you punching me for? I said, you're not listening. You're retired. You got a basement. You do experiments. Go down there and prove that the heart's not a pump. It's really not that hard. Come on. So he started working on it. He got together with John Barnwell, my dear friend, myself, who was just, I came in and out of the group like a butterfly, and some other people, his son, who was a heart cardiologist, and eventually Branko Fuerst, and some other very amazing doctors, anthroposophical doctors and otherwise. And they wrote an article after they did the research, and it got printed in Scientific America, demonstrating that the heart is not a pump. It is something like a vortex momentum booster. But now Branko Fuerst has taken the work of Ralph Marinelli with heart research and written 2 books, and both of those are now accepted. And just like everything else in the scientific community of superstition, they always act, once the new discovery comes, that they always knew that, and that their old theories, which are now we know are complete misnomers, they're basically lies, they're guesses, they are a mythology, they're complete nonsense. And so he has proven that really what happens is the capillary action at the very periphery of the body that sucks the blood out to it. And then it turns at this point and then turns around and then comes back. But it is used the entire cardiovascular system, the circulation system is used specifically as the home of the ego of the human being. Why? Because it goes all the way out to the very periphery of everything in your body, and it senses it, and it brings it back to where? The heart. And so what we really know immediately, the second that we know that the heart is not a pump, we know it's a sense organ, and that it is sensing exactly what's happening in the body. Now, this can be done many ways by the heart. And so when this research was started, and Ralph and John Barnwell and myself and others, we worked on this for years and years. I think I went off to Hawaii when the paper was finally produced. But we discovered amazing things about the heart, but mostly what we created were questions. We took the work of Schaumburger and the way that in the veins and the arteries that they spin, just like Schaumburger's devices that could actually move water uphill and could actually move trees, logs uphill, and all kinds of other devices Schaumburger created. So he worked with water and fluids, and eventually, after that, he started working on the question of levity. And that is something very important if we're going to understand what the human heart is. But I don't think mankind is ready for that. So Rudolf Steiner said that also directly connected to these islands of culture, directly connected to the heart as a pump, is to hear what the fifth chamber of the heart is all about. In other words, the mystery of the fifth chamber. Some people, like Ehrenfried Pfeiffer and others, insinuate that Rudolf Steiner was in fact assassinated because he gave out the secrets of the fifth chamber of the heart. Well, folks, I clearly put the fifth chamber of the heart secrets in this document. I'm sorry. So if I come up, assassinated, you'll know it's probably because I revealed not only the fifth chamber of the heart, but the sixth and seventh chambers of the heart. And no one has done that yet. Now, Rudolf Steiner did reveal this fifth chamber of the heart. It's the heart sac. And he pointed out that it is an amazing thing that scientists completely ignore. It's actually the fifth chamber. So you have the 4 chambers that we know of, and we have then this fifth chamber around the heart. And so that's a mystery. And because that was revealed, Rudolf Steiner supposedly gave out one of the great secrets of the mystery centers. And the point is that the heart is going to evolve over time. It has evolved over time. It's evolving now, and it's evolving into the future. And this book that we put out goes into many of the new discoveries that science is finding with the heart. They're so new that you can talk to a cardiologist, which I have, and talk to them about the heart vortex rings. They won't know what you're talking about. But really, that and this drug, it's called Alonacept, Alonacept, I believe, was found, as Rudolf Steiner insinuated, but he didn't say, that there would be chemicals found in the sac around the heart, the pericardium, that it has all this fluid in it, that would in fact be the keys to healing the heart. A normal cardiologist will tell you, and I know because 3-4 years ago I had a heart attack, and then it kept bothering me. I had arrhythmia, and then I was supposed to have a defibrillator put in, and then I had all these ejection fraction problems, all this stuff, and blah blah. And then one day, the doctor says it's a miracle, your heart is healed. And I said, well, that doctor, you told me that can't happen. The doctor said it can't. So, well, how did it happen? And she said, I don't know. But I would have to say, yes, you're a miracle case. So my heart came back after being really messed up. And so at that time, I was writing this book on the heart. And as a matter of fact, I kept thinking, strangely enough, throughout this time that I was putting together all this research, which took some years, as a matter of fact. I probably spent more time on this book than any other thing I've ever written. And as I was gathering this research, I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe the reason I can't finish the book is for a variety of reasons, I thought. But one of the reasons might be because my heart's messed up. And I'm actually writing a biography of my own heart so that I could get my heart to feel better. And in the end, when the book was done and was sent out and it got, good reviews from people who I was very interested in getting their opinion on it, and I was satisfied with it, and Hyla was satisfied with it, then we said, yeah, we'll give this out, but we're not going to go through the trouble of putting it into a book format and putting it on Amazon. We're just going to give it to everybody. So we tried every way we could. Now this way we're going to give it to you as an ebook in a PDF form. And when you read it, if you want, and maybe I should put a warning on the book, don't read this book because it has the secret of the 5th, 6th, and 7th chambers of the heart in it, which could be adverse to your health. Well, no, that's not right. Here's the reality. In that book are some of the most amazing things that I had no idea. Did you know that the axis of a child's heart in utero determines their health at birth? Scientists can measure the angle of the axis of the heart of a child in utero, and in some cases, they can stimulate it to be changed in very strange ways I'm not going to go into, but they can adjust it. And then when the child is born, of course, the heart rate is very high and the axis of the heart is different, and it only gets adjusted about the time that Rudolf Steiner says the etheric heart comes to take the place of the hereditary heart. And so again, Rudolf Steiner has said in this book, I put many, many quotations of Rudolf Steiner's, everything he says about the heart. And by the way, as I went through all the great thinkers, whether it be poets, philosophers, mystics, philosophers, ecclesiastical thinkers, every religion, myth, legend, for the heart. Every single thing I could find on the heart. And I would trace it back to who said it. And what I found was the following. And then I reversed my order. I said, plug in anybody and plug in the word heart next to it. And you will find their penultimate expression of the divine in the human being. And if they are religious, then they're going to go into a great description of how the divine is connected to the heart. And if they're not, they will attribute to the heart conscience, morality, love, mercy, grace. All of the great virtues are all attributed to the heart. And remember, the heart is where your mind is. Your thinking is up here. It's a reflection of all of your senses, but it is not your heart. It is not the heart of the matter. It is, you can come up with all the thoughts you want, but unless the thought is filled with warmth and life and sound and life, which is given to that thought by the heart, you're not going to have a thought that can actually go beyond the physical plane so that you can go into what's called imagination or sensory thinking, or what is in the title of this book, supersensory organ. What is a supersensory organ? It's one that can see beyond the 5 normal senses. Rudolf Steiner says there's 12 senses. So there's a sense of the ego. You can tell if you're talking to someone who actually has an ego, and we have revealed how there are people these days who have a physical and etheric body, even a soul body, but they don't have a spirit, or they may not even have a soul. You know that after speaking with a being like that for a second. You know because there's no warmth. From their heart, there's no warmth. There's no torus field of bioenergetic energy. In some cases, some people would say it's kind of a mix of electricity, free static electricity that has been ordered by the body that we could call bioenergetic energy of the body, biological energy, or it can be piezoelectric energy, which we know happens in the human head between the pineal gland and the pituitary gland and throughout the rest of the body. And particularly, the eye of the human being comes into existence. One of the great mysteries of the heart and blood is that the human eye, the human ego, come into existence through the amount of silicic acid, that is in your bloodstream. And that may sound like a crazy piece of wives' tale. But once you study this, and once you go out and you actually look up the modern research, you'll find that it's true. So many of the things that Rudolf Steiner has told us, whether it be about the 7 chambers of the heart, whether it be about the heart sac, about the medicines that can be created, now they have found that there's hundreds of chemicals, and they never looked in the sac that surrounds the heart that's filled with fluid. They never looked at what that substance was until someone had repeated pericarditis. In other words, their heart sac kept failing. And so what happened was the heart sac fluid started making a chemical that would regenerate the heart sac itself. And then they started looking and they said, well, what if someone has had this heart problem repeatedly or that heart problem repeatedly? Lo and behold, they found other chemicals in the interstitial fluid, or the fluid that's in the heart sac, and the chemicals there may be the key to healing all heart problems. All heart illnesses may have a component. So, as I mentioned, that drug, that chemical that they found, they mimicked and they made it into a drug called acerpectol or something, and that drug is now being used. So I can now reveal these things since 2019 when I started writing this book, and I can reveal this stuff. And always when I say I wrote it with the inspiration of my beloved wife and all those other humans and other beings who help in this work. As we reveal this stuff to you, I'm quite cognizant of the fact that only because these things have, in fact, almost 100 years after Rudolf Steiner's death, come into existence exactly as he said they would, and in the same way, and particularly in the same place. So all you have to do is take what Rudolf Steiner says and look long enough, and you will see that some new discovery will prove that what he said was true. Well, what he said about the heart is a picture of what the human being will become. He says there's not only a heart, there's an etheric heart. And this etheric heart basically becomes somewhat a majority of the body of the human being in the future. Now, this is very strange, but let's go over this. Let's look at one very basic thing Rudolf Steiner teaches us. And then we'll look at the way that relates to ancient India. Ancient India says there's a thing called a Sintamani, a wish-fulfilling stone. In the heart, in the heart, there's a stone. And on it, the wish-fulfilling stone, if you have it, you can wish for anything you want and you'll get it. But it says on it, Aum, A-U-M, which means basically body, soul, and speech, or, body, the Buddha Dharma Sangha, according to the Buddhist, body, speech, and mind, but also thinking, feeling, and willing. All these things are wrapped up in the heart, because the heart is a sense organ that can sense what happens in the nerve sense area of the spine and the head, and can sense what happens below the heart in the metabolic area all the way down to the foundation chakra. And between the two, it comes up with a synthesis in a balance. So Rudolf Steiner says there's two vortices, a vortex from above and a vortex from below. They meet in the heart. And they're going at different speeds because one is coming out from the earth and is carrying the speed of the stars and the starry heavens, and the other one is coming from above, carrying the speed of our sun and our own solar system. So from above, we're solar beings, but from below, we're starry zodiacal beings. And when they meet in the heart, you have this empty space that does magic. And over time, it will evolve into something more magnificent than we even know now. Let's just look at one aspect of that. Rudolf Steiner says when you go into the heart, go in as deep as you want, as the mystic did, and you can dive down, and the harder you dive down, the more it's going to hurt when you hit the stone in the core of the heart. Now, those are Rudolf Steiner's indications. It sounds a little bit wacky, but it's not wacky. The greatest, oldest philosophy of the Upanishad says the same thing. It says there's a stone in the heart, and that's right in the middle. It's right in the core, okay? But then if you go out of the heart with your consciousness and with this mystic consciousness, and you go into the far expanses of the cosmos, what happens? You eventually come to a void where you are terrified because there's nothing below you, there's nothing holding you, and you are terrified because you're looking at a chasm, an abyss in front of you. And that void makes you ask the question, what would happen if I go into the ultimate void? Would I extinguish myself? And so that can happen consciously. Now, he gives infinite exercises, it seems, certainly a lot of exercises, on how you have to go from a point to a sphere at infinity, a point in the heart expanding out to a sphere, a globe at infinity. And when you, as far as you can go, and when you would reach what you think is infinity, it's actually not, it's finite. At that moment, it snaps back to the point at the heart. He says, that's how the cosmos is. That's all you can attain through consciousness that we would call human consciousness at this point. And you can, for instance, to understand that in the heart is this solid rock, but at the other extreme of the heart, the other end of the spectrum, what's there? The void. Well, what is the heart? The heart collapses on itself and then expands. Collapses on itself. It doesn't expand with strength. That's nonsense. It's not a pump. It collapses on itself like a black hole. And after that, it then expands. And as it does, some very, very strange things happen, which in the book we describe in great detail, which are absolutely some of the most magnificent elements of occult anatomy that anyone can find anywhere. The Atrio Sino node, for instance, the Atrio Sinus node. The ancient Hindus and believers of the Upanishads said that there's a little tiny flame that's about as big as the thumbnail or smaller. And it sits in between, or sits in the heart near the lung. And this exchange between the heart and the lung is where this flame ignites. Well, I looked for that in 1,000 ways, and then I finally found it. It's the Atrio Sinus node. It's a little teensy tiny node, just that size, in the atria of the right atrium. As the blood comes back, having been spent in the body and returning with carbon dioxide, it carries with it different chemical compositions of potassium and sodium, and it goes over this little tiny node in the atrium. And we are then supposed to believe, by the way, the scientists tell us this, and the scientists also tell us that the Big Bang is a reality, and that the entire cosmos as we know it was smaller than a ball in the hand of God. Well, let's remember, it was the hand of God that had the ball in it. So when we're hearing this nonsense about the atriosinus node creating the entire electrical impulses that drive not only the contraction of the heart, but the bioenergy of the body, that has to be nonsense, of course. But there are chemistries going on in the blood, which your ego, your I am, comes into consciousness because of the relationship of oxygen and iron carrying in life through oxygen and through the iron, basically carrying it as a Christopher, as the carrier of this iron that carries oxygen, the element of life, prana, and it carries it to every cell in the whole body and then carries out the carbon dioxide. And then later, those red corpuscles that did this with the help of iron, anywhere from 3 days to 3 months, they die and they go away. And they have no nucleus. They're like the being of Christ, who offers itself up for the sake of all others, and to carry the load of carbon dioxide, the poison, the toxin, back out of the body. And somehow, the content of that in the blood as it reaches the atriosinus node creates some kind of chemical reaction between potassium and sodium that gives us this chemical charge that makes the heart 50 times more electric than the brain. People think the brain is the source of our electricity and the bioenergy in the body, but it is not. The heart is much more, and they can now measure this. And some people would say that 50 is a very conservative estimate. Some people would say it's 100 times, 500 times stronger, depending upon your emotions at the moment. So the human heart receives the blood back from the far distances of the periphery of the capillaries and tells, through chemistry, the heart, which is an organ, what is actually happening with the salts in the body, with the glucose in the body, so the acids and the bases in the body, and basically tells the heart with every single heartbeat how the whole body is doing. And that's why it's a sense organ. But it can perceive much, much more than that. When we look at the organ of the heart, it's just the tool, it's the vehicle, it's the machine of the spirit. The heart is the home of the spirit. But when we look at the mechanics of it, sometimes people think, well, look at the limitations of the body. Well, that's now. Let's look at the limitations of the human body 6,000 years from now. Let's look at it even 3,000 years ago. Let's look at it 4,000 years ago when human thinking was just coming to birth. And now look at human thinking. It has the audacity to tell God that God is dead and that the divine in us is more divine than any divine thing found in any natural law or eternal law in nature. I mean, this is how far we came in 4,000 years. How far will we come in 4,000 more? So the heart will evolve. And there's a mechanism for that. And if you understand, it's like with healing. They did studies down in Texas. If you can get someone to image the exact nature of the tumor or whatever it is that's causing the illness in great detail, and they meditate on it every day, healing is increased. Awareness increases healing. So if you were trying to figure out how the human blood, and this was one of my missions in all of this, was to figure out how human perception is written onto human blood, because Rudolf Steiner had described it as a process of sulfur, salt, and mercury. And I was trying to get it down to something understandable by humans. But it took 3 or 4 books to write it all out. So if you read the Eternal Ethers book, you will see a part of it. If you read the second volume that I helped Tyler write in the Gospel of Sophia, you'll see another part of it. And then in many other writings, you'll see all these things described, which were the revelations that came as we looked closer and closer and closer at this pulse beat of the universe. And for instance, one quick fact: what's the frequency of the heart? 7.83. The same frequency that is called the Schumann resonance, or the Schumann frequency. It's the same frequency that emanates throughout, they now know, the entire cosmos and passes through planetoids like a knife through butter. So the beat of your heart, 7.83, is in fact the frequency of the cosmos. And when you're in an alignment with it, especially at night when you're asleep, when your breath is 1 to 4, 1 breath per 4 beats per heart, and it's in that perfect rhythm, you align with that frequency and it heals you, heals your etheric body. So these are the kind of things that are in this book that Rudolf Steiner revealed, very spiritual things. But some of the coolest things were the new research that is being completely ignored by almost anyone that I came across, including my cardiologist and every intern and all these people I met in the hospital over the last few years. I keep asking them all these questions, and they just give you these silly answers as if they got their medical degree from it's a cartoon medical degree. It's a comic book. Someone taught them through a comic book some of this nonsense that they believe. So you ask them, how does the electrical charge come off of this little teensy tiny thing, the Atrio sinus node, and stimulate the whole body? And they'll give you some excuse that you can't even believe. No child could possibly believe that. So why do they believe it? Because they don't do their homework. And just as a footnote to this, anytime I do research or we do research, we go back and we say, okay, what first off is the state of the art? Here it is. Now, what is the previous state of the art? Here's ancient, and we go through the cultural periods: ancient India, ancient Persia, ancient Egypt, Chaldea, Babylonia, throughout Mesopotamia, through the Levant, to Greece, to Rome, to Europe, to modern times, to Anglo-American thinking, whatever, and to the conscious soul era. So we look at those stages, boom, 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 throughout history, and we say, oh, what did people think about the heart back in Egypt? What did people think about the heart back in Persia? And so we went through and put into this book all that's told throughout history. by some of the great thinkers. And remember, the penultimate expression of any thinker is what they think about the human heart. And what they will find is that the heart has in it the word ear, hear. It insinuates hearth, the home, the mother. It insinuates everything at the core of what we value as morality. So the human heart is the perfect representation of that. And that's why we have Valentine's Day to represent love, or we have a silly version of what the heart looks like to represent the heart as we give our heart to another and an arrow strikes it, because Cupid is the god of love and uses an arrow, the arrow of desire, to get you going. Oh, that's all good. But we need to throw away the concept that the human heart is a pump. And we need to expand our understanding of the heart to include all that the ancients believed and all that the future is bringing to us. Rudolf Steiner is one of the people who gave us answers to many of these mysteries, but he didn't give us the answer to the sixth and seventh chambers of the heart, which I'm going to tell you in a minute. They're called the oracles. And I think that this can be easily seen as a circumstantial proof that this is the sixth and seventh chamber, which will evolve in the future. But let's go back to the cube. The heart is a cube. The ancients called it a box, that the heart was inside of a box. And I couldn't figure that one out for the longest time. What are they talking about? Why is the heart in a box? The box actually fell from heaven, and in it was the wish-fulfilling stone, the stone in the heart, the bowl, the begging bowl of Buddha, which is, of course, the chi, which is the lower chakra, the book of wisdom, which, of course, is, higher thinking, imagination, and the stupa, which, of course, is the pineal gland, which demonstrates initiation, enlightenment. These four things were inside of a box, and they fell like a meteor to the earth, and they were all golden. And they later became the most revered things in all of Hindu philosophy, Tibetan Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, all of it comes down to these four things. Those four things are found in the human body, you see. So they knew from the beginning that there was a box around the heart. So I look, I talk, I ask everyone. No one knows jack about a box around the heart. No, it's called the media steinum. There's one in the front and one in the back, one on the top, one on the left. So in other words, Rudolf Steiner described it. He says that in the heart, you will find that you can go forward, backward, left, right, up, and down, and you will then meet surfaces that stop you. He says, that is the cube of the heart. And in the middle of that is that stone that you run into if you dive down into the heart. And you say, wait, that's exactly what the ancients said. But no one has ever taken what the ancients said and made it into something that a Westerner could understand. But yes, around the human heart is this cushion that is a box, and it protects it. And then next to that is the fifth chamber of the heart, the heart sac, the pericardium. And then you have the four chambers. But the sixth and seventh chamber are on top of the atrium of each, the left and right. So the atrium has on top of it a flap. It's the strangest looking thing. And you ask anybody about this, ask any heart doctor, what is the auricle? A-U-R-I-C-L-E-S. What are the auricles for? They will look at you with a blank stare. They don't even know it exists. What? They're a cardiologist and they don't know that there are two sacs that sit on top of the atrium that can expand, and they look like this. They look, if it was going this way, they'd look like this. They expand, like they go, and then they look like wings. And they can hold a whole volume of blood. What's that for? The very best scientists now, through research, and they've been trying to figure this out for quite some time, says that for some reason the heart may decide to hold a bit of extra volume of blood for some reason or another in one auricle or the other, but nobody knows why. But they have done a beautiful photography of them when they have been opened on people. They can't coincide why they open on those hearts when they do open. Usually it's an illness of some sort, and that's just one of the factors. But basically, folks, you have wings in your heart. And even those wings are held within a beautiful, loving sac, just like the sac that a baby is in utero, uh, uh, with the fluid that is amniotic fluid that is so special and so beautiful. What beautiful substance it is. In a way, that's what the heart sac is. And so the heart sac holds many of the cures for illnesses of the heart, as well as other diseases, more than likely. That's what science is telling us. The oracles, no one knows what they're for, but I say that they are to tune the multiple, and this may blow your mind, and you'll have to look it up to demonstrate that I'm not making this stuff up like some crazy person. Inside of the heart, they don't know how many there are. There are vortex rings. There are at least one in each of the four chambers, but there could be more. And somebody has found multiple ones in little microforms. But let's just say that there are 4 heart vortex rings. And what happens is, as the blood flows, they create these like smoke rings, or like a dolphin blows these rings underwater that you've seen, and they are really solid, and they're rings and they're tubes, and they keep going, like, they keep going, and they have like a frequency to them, right? Well, that's what these heart rings have. They have a frequency to them, and when the blood flows through them, if the frequency isn't at a right frequency, it causes the heart to malfunction. So when you zap it with a defibrillator or you zap it with a pacemaker, you are electrically, through what is called the process of HIS, H-I-S, stimulating the atrio-sino nerve to stimulate the heart so that it can bring it back into the frequency of those heart ring vortexes. Now, tell this to a doctor, they'll tell you you're crazy, but that just shows you that the books that they use in medical school right now are more outdated than they're not worth throwing onto the fire. They come up with these ideas that a child could have come up with, and they think it's a new discovery when in fact it was just their obstinance to look at the phenomena and observe it properly. So now that they're observing the heart and they're observing the flow of the heart, and they can measure with Doppler the flow of the heart, they find these heart rings. We discovered those heart rings with Ralph Marinelli at some medical institute downtown when we were using Doppler research when we were studying the heart. And we found that there was more than 2 beats to the heart, that there were actually 4 sounds that you heard on a Doppler. And actually, I was the person who discovered that. I said, what about those other sounds? I mean, that's how naive Shoshin mind is. The beginner mind just says, excuse me, doctors, you're the best cardiologists here in the state of Michigan, and you didn't notice that it goes shh, 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 shh. That's 4. There's 4 beats. And they go, no, you're wrong. And then they had to spin the heart around, and they aimed the Doppler in a different way than they ever did before, and they did some kind of echo thing. And then they got to see, they snuck around the back, and they went, oh my gosh, there they are. So we literally discovered these vortex rings. We didn't know they were vortex rings at the time. We thought they were the thing that drove the heart, the beat of the heart. And that was correct. So now, all the top research, we should be able to, and we can, right now. And this, again, sci-fi. But why is it sci-fi? Because the heart is a supersensible organ that reads the whole body and can tell you everything about your organs, because it's the heart under the rib cage, and it has the other organs, and 2 of the organs are either using the head or the genitalia as the moon. But the sun is the heart, the head and the genitalia the moon, but then you have the liver is Jupiter, the Mars is the gallbladder, Saturn is the spleen, lungs are Mercury, the kidneys are copper, or Venus. So these are correspondences that have been known since the ancient times. All we have to do is wake up, pay attention to them, and then go look at them anew with new eyes, with beginner mind, and you can say, oh, well, hello, there's 4 beats going on. You can clearly hear them. Why are you ignoring the other 2? This is the kind of stuff that we continued to work on. And as we were doing this for the last few years, again and again, shocked. Do you know that right now you can buy a watch? It looks just like a watch. You put it on. It's a service, actually. And it measures your heartbeat. And it measures, of course, where the ancients measured right here on your pulse and measured 3 levels, superficial, medium, and deep levels. And they could tell everything wrong with your body, all your organs, everything through the pulse beat right there with a few fingers through ancient Chinese wisdom. But you can put a device here that reads that and it records it. Then it sends it to a computer. And the computer analyzes it, and the computer will tell you how much longer you have to live and what you're going to die of, likely. And they're finding that from their predictions that they're astoundingly accurate, because the people who do these wrist computer analysis of your what's called your heart rate, variable heart rate, once they determine your variable heart rate and they start to work with it and they do some analysis with the computer, they then can find out what your weak organ is, and they can start to treat it now instead of wait till a doctor tells you after you have the symptoms. So when they talk about med beds, well, they're getting to the technology where frequency, and particularly heart frequency, blood analysis is going to be able to tell us everything. So these are some more things that we found here, that through heart rate variability, you can determine how long you're going to live and what the organ is going to fail first, and in what order the others will fail. And this goes for the time, from about age 21, they find that it's pretty effective with people that age and going on, and you can do that. But you can also get an ECG and determine the axis of your heart, the electrical axis of your heart, or in some cases, like with young children, they determine the axis is way off, and they actually do adjustments to the mediastatum, the box around the heart. They adjust it so that they make the heart's axis different. The axis of the earth is 23.5. Well, the ideal axis of the adult after going through metamorphosis is generally around that, but the percentage of inclination for the electrical axis of the heart is something different. But they can tell if it isn't a normal 90 plus, if it's plus more up to 180 or not minus down to 0, they can predict what your illness is. They can tell you how ill you are, and so on and so forth, simply by doing a heart analysis. And that's just the beginning of the beginning. What's happening with blood? Let's remember, right now, 5G is attacking your blood, and it's telling that iron to die, and it's killing your zinc. And your zinc is trying to tell your red corpuscles to take that iron up so you can take the oxygen up and take it to the rest of the body. And so you get hypoxia. So as that is being attacked, if you take zinc, it helps, but you're being attacked all the time. And you're also being attacked all the time by electromagnetic frequencies. But 5G is just a millimeter, very, very tiny and very powerful, very short distance, but it basically fries your inner organs. Heart rate variability, blood content, all of these things can help us understand what our internal clock is doing, but the external clock that is being attacked by the trauma of electromagnetic frequencies, 5G, attacks in the bloodstream. I've said since probably 30, 40 years ago that our real attack is the pharmaceutical companies on our bloodstream, and now we see that that's true. We have so many of those issues. I'm not going to go into them. But what we also discovered here is that the ancients were correct. They had a thing called a Rahu stone, which is a Sintamani stone, which is basically the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve comes from the metabolic system, the lower area. It's going towards the heart, and when it does, it crosses the vagus nerve, combines all of the nerve impulses from below, and through a nerve that is very wide and very large, goes through the heart, right through the Atrio sinus node, on up into, join the other cranial nerves. 12 cranial nerves go into the corpus quadragemini, and there they're analyzed. Well, what that is what Steiner calls the frontal spinal column. So in the back, you have all this nerve activity, and the heart, of course, reads all of that. And every time your heart beats, it goes into that sealed column of fluid and pressurizes it and causes the internal cavities, the 7 cavities, or there are actually 5 ventricles, a 6th ventricle, which is atrophied on the top of the head that used to be the pineal gland, and then, of course, the chamber of the head itself. So there's 7 chambers in the head, 7 chambers in the heart, 7 chambers in basically under your rib cage. So those three things, thinking, feeling, willing, each have 7 chambers. But the heart, through your respiration and through the heartbeat, sends a rhythm, the rhythm of the cosmos, 7.83, into your brain to in fact act as what they call Shiva's drum. It is the place where these rhythms go into the brain, and they bring with them information, fantastic information that is in fact feeding the brain as an organ, and then the brain is in direct contact with the vagus nerve to the heart. The brain comes into coherence, and what happens then? Then the higher activity of ascension happens, what's called the earthly and cosmic nutrition stream, which we've talked about a very great deal. So in this book, we start off by saying we're going to answer a few mysteries. And all I can say is I hope you get a chance to see it, and because some of the most beautiful poetry I've ever found in it is in it, as well as some of the greatest philosophy, some of the greatest science. It just shows that we are, in fact, the hieroglyph of the universe. We are an image of the great I am as the small I am, and we are, in fact, so wondrous, and we're becoming more all the time. So in this book, you're going to hear about the chambers of the hearts. You're going to hear about coherence with the brain, etherization of the blood. You're going to hear all about what happens to the heart in the utero and the axis of the heart rate variability. The I am is found in the heart, and so there's a whole philosophical component to this. The electrical fields of the heart are taken out and shown exactly what they are, how they worked, magnetic hydrodynamic generators, plasma generators. All of those things are revealed through the heart. Heart thinking is gone into, from Rudolf Steiner's point of view, this secret box in the heart that Steiner says reports all of our karma. It records all the karma, where the pink drops of immortality are stored. That's in the heart. I had to go into the chakras because, the heart controls. It's the major chakra that controls all of them. Also, even with excretions of the heart that control the glandular system, the alchemical processes of sulfur, salt, mercury, all of these things are found in the heart. And the root of the great world tree is in the heart. And that is where Eden is. We, when we understand what the heart is, bring in New Jerusalem. We bring in Eden redeemed. And at that point, you then realize that because perception is written on the blood, if you have the right blood chemistry, and if you understand perception, then you can every single day, through your perception, looking at the world, turn it into either a heaven or a hell. And that was the intent of this study, was to see that the control mechanisms for the I am, for the ego in the blood and through the heart, is the mechanism for true perception of spiritual worlds. And therefore, the heart becomes the ultimate supersensible